Welcome to Beyond Sunday, the podcast where we're helping you take your faith beyond Sunday and into your everyday life. My name is...
We are?
Well,
cool.
That's usually what we do. Isn't that how we start every one of these podcasts?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Chael Branda, and I serve as the executive director here at Trinity New Life Church. And I am joined by my co-host, Clayton Bell, the lead pastor of Trinity New Life Church. Now, our attempt is on this podcast to take the Sunday sermon and dive into it a little bit deeper to help you guys take it into the Monday through Saturday, the everything outside of the 1 hour,
Right.
or how some might say into the 167.
Right. And if people wanted to ask questions about that, they're like, how do I do that? Or what's going on? Or
You can always email us, podcast@trinitynewlife.com, or follow us on Instagram at Trinity New Life.
That's true. So last week we started, 2 days ago, we started our brand new sermon series, 167. This is a 5-week sermon series. And again, I don't know if you count the first week. Do you say over the next 5 weeks and then we're there? Or as you say over the next 4 weeks and this week? It's very confusing.
I think you say over the next 5 weeks because you take the message from Sunday and you go into that week with it. So it'd be
Okay.
over the next 5 weeks we will be going through this.
But a lot of things going on with this sermon series. First, this is what all of our discipleship groups, which last week started, some in a fun week, some just jumped into it. Others, they're starting this week, and everybody is starting off with sermon application. So all of our discipleship groups are talking about 167 in their discipleship groups. If your discipleship group leader is not talking about 167, please, I feel like it's like the stadium tip line. Please let us know.
Groups
so that we can
at
publicly
Trinity New Life.
flog them. Yeah, groups at. Please let Kelly know. So that we can make sure everybody's on the same page. But the reason we do that is at the beginning of every semester, and almost overwhelming amount of our groups stay sermon application, because I think it's really tough to have a bunch of different narratives taking place in your life.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we produce a devotional and we have sermon-based small groups and the sermon is because you're always so busy that if you just had the sermon and it just kind of goes to this level, it's tough. But if you're having different narratives of like your sermon, you got your small group, and you got your devotional are all in different narratives, it's really tough to have that dive deeper into your life. So we're trying to give a lot of reinforcement so that you actually can get some mileage out of the time.
And that's really what this podcast is for too. Like, again, this is another layer of taking that Sunday message and really applying it. So if you're...
And we're doing our best to really move away from simple sermon recap, because if you already listen to the message, it's basically the same thing.
Exactly.
Deleted scenes, applying it, asking each other questions that neither of us prepped for, which I think produces much better podcasting. But anyway, so that's one of the things happening with 167 is we kicked off our discipleship groups. Now our discipleship groups are talking about it. The other thing is that for at least this series, we are going to be having a decent chunk, at least 50% of the music in the service is going to be at the end of this. This is intentionally to create some, one of the phrases we've been talking about, some different stuff with services. One of the phrases you came up with was, it's the same service with deeper moments. Now you were using it in a different way, but I think that idea of, it works in both ways, that there are times where the music plows the ground for people to receive the message. And there are other times where the message plows the ground for people to be able to respond in worship. And so we said, we're going to create these moments where we're going to be pressing in. We're going to be responding to God in worship through communion, through prayer, and through singing. And we know, I don't know if people know that we know, not that people listen to this podcast. I cannot imagine you're listening to this podcast and you leave early.
I don't think that well, maybe, nah. No, I'm going to go. I'm gonna
there are
go.
some that
if
might
you do,
get
I want
here-
to know about it. Yeah,
some
they might get here late.
Some that might come in late. Which that's, when you don't have the 20 minutes of music at the beginning.
Do you realize how many
late.
people are waiting to see if we drop names? Like they're always mention Chael, or they always mention Mariah listening to the podcast. Are they going to call out people who are late?
Well, Mariah, it's not her fault that she doesn't come because she's in an internship and she works right now. So she's in a season. She's probably like, you guys listening to this right now.
I'm so glad you think of me and listen to me.
And so, no, I'm not going to call out the people who, I can call the people who come in late. But we also know that some people leave early. When we say communion, even if there's no music at the back,
they'll leave.
They get up, they leave, they have to go to the bathroom right at that time. And here's the other part of it. We know that the most uncomfortable thing for non-believers, and even some believers, is music.
Right.
Which is really strange because music in church is not any kind of new phenomenon at all. I mean, back into the Old Testament, you see songs being sung, musical instruments being played and referenced over and over again. You see worshipers and singers and everything being a part of it. But we know that that can be a difficult part. And so this is the line we're trying to walk. I'm trying to give permission with a push. If you're like, okay, look, that was about as much as I could take, the sermon, because I know the sermon is the easiest thing to consume and the most palatable part of it. We want to be able to create an easy place for you to be like when you, if you're coming for the very first time, you heard like a song and a half, you heard a message, tithe announcements, and you kind of get, and you like leave right after communion, or you don't even take communion, and you're like in the lobby, go like, that was a lot. And maybe you're not actually physically panting, but like your soul is in your mind is like, oh boy, okay, that was a lot. That was rough. Okay, I'm getting used to this. It's like the first time you go to the gym versus the last time.
The RX workout.
Yes. Okay. Well, I see. Yeah. All right. Good job. This is like the couch to 5K, and this is like you just got off the couch. Now you might eventually, and it really was a big stretch for you, but there are moments where we want to continue to push. We want to say, take your next step, keep pressing in, keep moving forward into God, responding in communion. Maybe you've never done that. Responding in singing, responding in more interaction, more activity, more participation in singing. And our hope is that, again, we're going to take at least this sermon series, if not kind of, we'll see how this goes. Right. We feel like we have a feeling of how it's going to go. But letting the sermon plow up and make it that much easier for people to respond. Because we also know, we're going to tell you everything we know, that people are coming in, you get caught in a conversation in the lobby, you come in at the end of song 1, middle of song 2. Right. You got to check your kids in. Kids don't want to go in real quick. You got to go to the bathroom. You kind of miss those moments. And we wanted to be able to create this responsive music worship moment and some prayer too. We want to be able to try to create the environment for a few people. It's not just going to be anybody who comes up and says, I want to get up on stage and talk, but to create a few moments where some of our leaders and people who move and are gifted more in that area can get up and try to give some specific encouragement that moves the service, moves the people forward along the lines of what God is trying to speak in that service, what we believe. So those are two, that's, I know, a longer explanation, but again, a lot of the people who listen to this like the behind the scenes stuff. Right. And so that's one of the things we're trying to create, because we want you to think about responding to God in worship with everything, always.
That response is just so key. It is a totally different thing to hear something and go, hey, that was good, that was important, and then to walk away from it and just leave it where it's at. Yeah. It's when we respond, when we put it to action, when we do something to it. And there have been several great moments in our Sunday services where we've maybe...
You're just so far away from the microphone.
Because I feel very loud. I feel like the moment in worship has led us to these things where we've grown, or we've been challenged in something, usually somebody closing the worship set, but then we're transitioning into something. We're not letting some of these moments. So by us looking at our set list, by us looking at our service plans, by us adjusting and looking at it and going, okay, when are the moments in the service that would inspire a response? Yeah. And how can we adjust for those kinds of things? I think that's something that we want. Again, that's kind of the great antithesis of this podcast. We want it to go beyond just these single like thoughts or moments or things, and go something deeper into these times. And so it's gonna be a fun series to just kind of see how that operates on a Sunday morning, to see how we see and how we feel the Spirit moving and all that kind of stuff.
The way we're encouraging people to do that, the way we respond, because again, you have to think about wherever you are, you've got to think there's a lot of other people on a spectrum. I think the spectrum used to be about this wide of people coming into church, of people coming in with some kind of background, some type of framework, even if it was like, oh, I was Catholic, I was this, but you had some framework for it. And then for whatever reason, there was some type of limitation on how deep into the presence of God, into an understanding, into a worship moment we might have been able to go as a church. I think there's a bunch of factors into that. One, that just the maturity of the church as a whole. I mean, we're just coming up on 10 years. My ability to lead, the music team's ability to do that, our intercessors and prayer people, the overall maturity of the congregation,
right.
Not the age, but the spiritual maturity and
right.
hunger of the
right.
congregation. I mean, Jesus could not do many miracles because of a lack of faith.
Mm-hmm.
How much more are we going to be limited by the faith that's in the room? And I think as that's continued to grow, but also our society continues to be less and less churched, that instead of trying to reach people within this spectrum, we're now trying to reach people within this spectrum. And this is why you got to watch on YouTube, because my hands just went from a V to almost a wide W. I just went from like a 30-degree angle to about a 104-degree angle.
Very specific English
screenshot
major.
and measure. Nick Wass is going to do that. And you have to think about like, man, why can't we do this more? Why can't we do this more? Sundays become very difficult because you're trying to reach everybody.
Right.
And we've got to try to create an experience, a message, all this kind of stuff that's going to reach across all these boundaries. And that becomes really difficult. We could create a much deeper worship experience, quote unquote, deeper worship experience every single week, but that would make it that much harder for the newbies out there, for the people with no experience to be like, to be able to access it. You know, I was in, where was I this past week?
This past week?
Oh, I was in Tampa.
Tampa? Yeah.
No? When I was in Tallahassee.
Okay.
For the New Rules Conference.
Okay.
Went to a coffee shop there called Lucky Goat. And they serve Lucky Goat at Starkey Barn, in case you're wondering.
Starkey Market. The barn is not open yet. Anyways.
I serve it at Starkey. There's 19 different things called Starkey.
I know. That's why I was clarifying. It was Starkey Market.
The ranch, the market, the barn.
The Starkey family. They are leaving their mark.
We are not giving up all of this to the Mitchells. We will name everything. And I, in just complete autopilot, said to the woman, Grande Black Coffee. And she goes, we've got 12 and 16. What's a Grande? I was like, first of all, don't make me Starbucks explain you.
It's a 16 ounce.
I was like,
for those of you who don't know.
But I was like, oh, I'm using language. She's like, you got to translate that for me. And I feel like that's what, as opposed to the person who can walk in at Starbucks, what's a complicated Starbucks order that you have ever given?
Right now, it's a jade citrus mint tea, half lemonade, half hot water, honey packets, no syrup.
You're a psychopath.
That was a tea. That wasn't even a coffee.
But you think about, that's what it's a lot like for people walking into church, where the baristas who are living in that world all the time are doing that. And you've got two baristas in your house. So you're able to learn that language, but how do we then press deeper? And so this is, to be able to tie this back into the 167, I think this is why it's so important for us to be worshiping everywhere always, that we start seeding that type of understanding and language to each other. And I think, obviously for those people who follow me on Instagram, saw the story, I can talk about it a little bit yesterday when I was getting my tires changed. But the more you interact with people who are not serving God or not serving God deeply, the more you understand how big the language and culture, and I don't mean like American, non-American, but inside the church, outside the church, how big that divide has grown and how much you have to really think about the plainness of your language, the word choice, defining certain words, getting people onto certain pages. But if you're only trying to be able to get God into this 160, this one, and not the 167, I think you're going to be in, it's going to make sense. It's not going to make sense why we just don't go deeper. But when you're speaking about God, when you're thinking about God, when you're interacting with people on the basis of faith on a really consistent basis, you see, we've got this broad range of people we want to interact with.
Right. I think that is I want to be a church where we have people who don't understand faith that are coming in.
Right.
So I always want to, we do this consistently when we're looking at things. And I know we're going a little bit broader to the series right now, somewhat, but this idea of, can we make this accessible for that person to then call them to something deeper is such a, I get so excited when we're sitting down with people and we're having these conversations where they're not understanding. They're like, oh, what you said makes some sense. Oh, I've never heard it explained that way. I've never seen that before. Like those types of things is like, yes, that is how we make disciples who change the world. When we can break things down for people in order to bring them into these things, it's important. But I actually do want you to share. Can you share some of that story from yesterday? Because that was a really great story. And I think that it talks about us in that mundane, everyday, ordinary life that we have.
So just as an example, even of you're talking about the understanding the language, I think it's almost the difference when we have people who come and they go, well, who can take communion?
We have
inside our language. And then there's other people who go, what is communion?
Right. Oh, yeah.
So that, like, well, I'm trying to understand who can take it. Okay. So here's a story about 167, living 167. So I got to get my oil changed. Doesn't happen as often because it's synthetic, but boy, that synthetic oil, was it made out of liquid
gold,
titanium or something like that? So went to the one that's right near the church. I don't know how I'm still feeling about it yet, so I'm not going to give them a full name endorsement. And because
they don't sponsor the podcast
every oil
yet.
change you go to pull into the front, and you just pull in. They're like ding ding, and they wave you in. And they're like, oh, stop. We'll get it. I was like, okay. Well, nobody's looking at me or waving. Nobody's doing anything. Okay, whatever. So go inside of the waiting room. And brought my computer to continue to work. This was just like an hour in the middle of the day. I was like, okay, I can do all my work remotely right now. So let me just go knock this out. And the chairs have these high arms. So I was like, well, I'm not like this. So I go over to this little bar area where you can look out into the place. And there's one other gentleman, mid to late 60s. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I opened my laptop. I did not even, what's funny is I left my earbuds at the office because I normally would have probably put them in first when I sat down to start working, and I didn't. So I went and sat there, and I just literally had opened my computer, and he started asking me if I was from the area and how long I'd been here, and if I was new. And so I was kind of giving our story a little bit, and he had very thick accent. Mm-hmm. And he said that he and his wife just really didn't know anybody. They were trying to figure out ways to get to know people around here. So I look like the kind of guy that a mid to late 60-year-old is gonna, like befriend. And so we started talking, and I was like, wait a minute, this is probably one of those things where you're supposed to. He's like, I don't really know where to get to know people and where to meet people. And I was like, yeah, good luck. I was like, wait, this is exactly when you would say church is a great place. So I was like, well, for me, because I can't remember if he had asked me what I did already, and I think so, and explained how we knew the area and everything. And then as I invited him to church and kind of explaining a little bit about it. I don't know where he's coming from at all at this place. And so again, I'm trying to be like, well, we're a non-denominational Christian church by which we observe the orthodox beliefs, but have a relevant creative presentation of the God. Like all those are like
charismatic drops.
Jargon. None of that. And then the more we got to talking, he said he was Muslim. He and his wife, they live in Canada, but they snowbird here, and he's from Ottawa. And as more and more I was getting his story, he was born in Palestine, moved to Lebanon, and then went to college in Germany. His German's better than his English. Graduated from university there, became a chemistry professor. And I don't know if he was a chemistry professor over there. He's been a chemistry professor in Arizona, in Atlanta.
Syracuse.
And it's Syracuse. And then he had lived in Arizona. I was like, oh my God, man, how many places have you lived? I was like, I don't, it just doesn't work. This is so many places. It's amazing. And he was saying how he had traveled, and he was saying back in the day you could get like this $70 a month or $80 a month Greyhound unlimited travel. So he and a bunch of friends in 1975, basically, I think like in a week or two, they would stay in a city all day, and then they would get on the bus at night and sleep while the bus drove.
Smart. They saving on hotel rooms,
saw the whole place. Yeah, no hotel rooms.
No hotel rooms.
Nothing like that.
Amazing.
And so I was like, okay. And so he was just saying he didn't have anything, and he invited me to coffee, and I was like, I don't know that I could do that right now. And he's like, no. So so I found a piece of paper and had him write out his name and number. He gave me his name, his number, his address. So I took the church card back from him, put my name on that, and he's like, maybe you come for coffee. I come to church.
There you go.
And it just, so it was one of those things too. When you humanize people, it changes the way you hear every interaction. So doesn't speak English, phenomenal. And so this again, the oil change place was like, it starts at this, but he's like, but you said it was going to be this on the phone, sir. I told you it was going to be this. It's going to start here. It's going to move up. And the guy felt like he was a little short with Badri was his name. And I couldn't tell if it was like, my man, I've been through this with you 7 times. Or if it was like, hey, old Arab man. Mm-hmm. But I was very sensitive to it because that's not exactly the way that the tone he was taking with me.
Right.
And it so I don't know. Maybe he's like, I'm just tired of dealing with older people who never seem to listen to me on the phone. So I'm going to text him today and just say, I don't know if you do text, but I'm looking forward to coffee soon.
That's awesome.
It's pretty. It's actually a pretty big honor to be invited. When you have coffee with like somebody from an Arabic background.
I told you. I said, "Oh, that's gonna be a good cup of coffee. That's going to be a good cup of coffee."
Sit with him and his wife and hear stories and stuff like that. So, I think that'd be really fun.
But I think this is such a.
So it's just one of those moments where it's like, this is every moment where I'm like, I'm gonna put my earphones in. Mm-hmm. I don't make me be a pastor right now. I just want to be my oil change. And I was like, hey, dum you just preach a message called 167
with everything. Taking the ordinary, everyday, mundane, parts of your life and giving them to God. And that's exactly how
everyday, ordinary, going to work, walking around,
sleeping, knocking,
ordinary.
I just like the fact that you came, because we met right after that and you were like walking me through the story. And it was that moment of like, how do we look at the time? And this is not a discipleship group assignment. So it's just something I particularly wanted my discipleship group to do is like, I'm having them write out their hours in the week of like, okay, where is that 167? Like, how can we look at the 167 and be like, oh, I want to give everything to God. I want to lay before him my ordinary, boring life. If we don't know where that is. And in this case, this was such a moment of, I have to go get the oil change. You had the time, go get it done. And it would have been something that could have been so passive. And we do that all the time in our life where I said this to my discipleship group this morning, like it's so much my fault when it comes to these things is I always take the easy route. It's like you used a great illustration this weekend of the glasses and all the different things. But what stood out.
Shout out to Carly Schrader.
For all the glasses.
Because she just kept, I just asked her in
Can I have
Colin
a
2 weeks
pair?
ago, do you guys have any silly or weird glasses? And then she just kept putting them on my desk. And every time she did, I looked at one and was like, I could do 2 minutes on that.
but it wasn't just the glasses. Like you could have had a single pair or a couple pairs and been able to talk about having a different perspective with glasses. But when you took the glasses and you had all the romance and luck and social media and then you took the very holy Trinity New Life sunglasses and were able to put that over top of these things and to be like people trying to wear 2 pairs of glasses at the same time and like all of those stuff, that was the impactful. Like it is so easy for me, especially because this happens to be kind of the career ministry life that I live. People ask me what I do and a door is usually very easily opened up for me to talk about my faith. But is it so much easier for me to talk about, I help lead a volunteer organization of 250 people? That's sometimes I've totally used that answer before because I've looked at a moment and gone, I don't have the time. I don't have the moment. I don't have these things. And I take the easy route in these things. I'm not lying. I'm not hiding anything. Right. I'm just taking the easy route. And so when we're talking about
even when you do tell people about church and then you could just go, do you go to church?
And then they don't want to talk to you ever again? No,
but I'm saying it's like even to remember that part of like, I work at a church. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, do you go to church?
Yeah. I usually used to use this phrase. I would say, well, I'm contractually obligated
to ask you.
Yeah. I was like, I'm contractually obligated.
That's a really good line. I just have seen this so often when we're talking about these things to be like, what's the easiest way? Like, I'm too busy. I'm too doing this. I'm too there. I've got this checklist. I've got all the kids here. I don't have the moment to stop in the grocery store to help this person out because I'm on a time. Like, we can come up with all the excuses and we always look for the easy way out. But when we really do get put in these moments where God's like, you're going to go sit at an oil change place and you're not going to have your earbuds. And I'm going to have this gentleman just randomly start asking you about if you're from this area or not. You sit back and go, wow, this is a really amazing God moment that did not take a ton from you and has actually opened some incredible doors for you to probably have an incredible cup of coffee. And this man probably has incredible stories to hear and be able to open those moments to have an evangelistic conversation, to push into those types of things. And it's just, man, if we really we can really grasp this concept of giving God everything and being God in every hour. Where are you? What are you doing in my life? We really can't, like, when you want to talk about changing the world, that's a very easy way to start seeing it happen.
Very much so. Yeah. So speaking of that, so that was my story.
Yep.
Those are the questions I text you ahead of time. Have you, what's a moment, it doesn't have to be recently, where you felt like, okay, I'm not in church mode. I'm not in discipleship group mode. I'm just in
everyday
person mode.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, God's calling me to do this, or here's how I need to do this to respond to God. And you did it.
I think we have to, well, one.
I'm hoping there's a lot of examples that you have.
I
But
do
just
have,
pick one.
I do have a lot of examples. But I'm actually going to go way back in the life of before. This is a part of TNLC that most people don't know. My children were actually small at one point in time. They were actually shorter than me.
They were younger and shorter.
And they wore diapers and they cried a lot. And it was a whole world. And like, I was mom full time. Had 3 very small children, all under the age of 4, all at the same time. And Hannah was, she was a crier, not because she didn't love life.
She was an early Enneagram
but I
6.
tease her that
What if I swallow this?
I tease her that she cried for the first 2 years of her life. That's really not a very big like jump. She really probably did cry for the first 2 years of her life. But in that season of my life, I can't tell you how many times, and moms and parents get this, of this idea of like, you can look at the same walls for only so long and you've got to get out. And it was like, and even with 3 kids, even with 3 kids under the age of 4, and it was crazy. And I never wanted to pack them all up to go anywhere at any time. And I really would much rather stay at home. There were times where I'm like, oh, we're just leaving. We're just going. I don't care. And so I would go to either the mall or to the park, or we actually had a pond down the street, like those types of things. And there are just so, like, I look back in that season of my life, and I was volunteering at a church on a Sunday, but I was not on a church staff. That was not my everyday. My focus in that time was keep the small humans alive and to try to sleep if I could find a moment in that. And there were so many times in that season of my life, that is when I really learned to hear the voice of God, because it was so, there was just lots of noise around me with the kids, but I would go to the park, and so many times things would be happening around me. But in particularly, there's this moment where there was this little girl. We were at the playground. I think I was pregnant with Jaden at the time, and Michael and Hannah were kind of toddling around on this little kids' playground, and there was this older child, probably just, it was school day, so probably not kindergarten, but 4, maybe just turned 5, who's on the playground, and they were just tough, like shoving, pushing, like, and as a mom, you're like, oh, we're gonna use our hands nicely, we're gonna be nice. And my kids were just wanted to stand next to me at that point in time. They're like, just don't want to go play at all, and there was a moment where the kid turned and just shoved another kid. It was not even mine at that time. And immediate reaction for me is like, grab a hand. You want to go out and grab a hand and be like, no, you're not doing. And I stopped, and I just went. I said, honey, I said, are you okay? I was like, we're like, that's not what we do to our friends. And a mom came over, and she was visibly upset, and you could tell what happened. Well, I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I was like, she pushed her. It was this kid's mom, and she talks. And she's like, I'm sorry. She takes her kid and she just kind of goes over. And something like God really was like, no, you need to go push in there. You need to go just be like, calm her down, say it's okay. And I was like, I just want to let you know it's fine. Like, if she wants, like, she can come play with my kids. Like, we'll be okay. Like, it turned out that the woman had just found out on the phone that she was going through a divorce, and she just found out on the phone that her husband had been served papers because it was actually an abusive situation. And probably what this kid was displaying was what they had seen in the house. And so she was a visible wreck because she couldn't go. He had been served papers, and she couldn't go back, and she didn't know where to go. And I was like, you know what? Let's go to McDonald's. I was like, oh, we don't have a ton of money. I was like, but I can figure out some French fries and a hamburger. I'm like, do you want to go to McDonald's? I was like, my kids would be very excited if we went, because we did not do McDonald's often at that point. And like, but it was one of those moments, like, I will never forget that time of like God saying push into it. And that was such an extreme situation. I never would think that so we just sat at a McDonald's until she got a phone call that she gotten in touch with a lawyer. They were coming to meet her. Like, she would taking it, and like, but it was one of those moments of like, she just needed to talk about anything but. So we talked about kids. We talked about she had gone to school and she was not from this area. So she was hoping to move back home. She was telling me all about growing up in Indiana, like all these types of things. And I was like, snow? Tell me more about snow because I'm Floridian. And like that was just a huge moment when I was like, oh, wow. And I wish every moment was like that. But the second question you asked me was, when's a moment you didn't listen? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I actually have more of those stories than I do of I have this, and this is where we look at the power of God and we're like, why don't we listen? Because when the power of God can move in these moments and something this extreme happens, there have been more times in my spirit where I've heard God say, hey, slow down here. Hey, don't talk so rough to the kids. Parenting is a great way to hear God speak and teach you how to learn grace and learn all of these things. And how many times in a moment where I've been rushed or I've been short and I've barked at a kid or I've changed a schedule because it's easier for me or I've done something and God go, you need to slow down or you need to go back and apologize. And me in my pride or in my moment gone, I'll do it later. Like, no. Like, no, that's not God. That's me just overanalyzing the situation. And then later find times where my kids are like, that moment hurt me. And I'm like, crap. I knew that. Like, God told me that I could have nipped it a lot faster. I could have gone back to that and been able to apologize I think that there have been numerous situations outside of just like, again, that the season of life when you're raising small children, I think for both sets of parents is just an incredible time where you're learning endurance and you're learning strength and you're learning wisdom and you're learning more about you than you ever thought you would ever learn. And in that season of my life was really when I was able to start hearing God in a new way, to understand not just with my kids, but with people around me, when he was speaking, and what he wanted me to do. And there, I actually have more stories of when I wasn't faithful or wasn't obedient to God, that I look back now and I go, oh, you know what would have happened if? And I hate that. I hate having those moments where you're like, if
they are only. Good motivators to remember. It is a good motivator to remember the things that you missed. Not that you want that to always be there, but I think that's a helpful motivator. I think when you're younger in the faith, you tend to be obedient a little quicker or be a little more obedient because everything, you see a God moment in everything.
Yeah.
And when you get older, you're like, that's ridiculous. Or I think what happens is you just get into such a routine that it gets dulled. Mm-hmm. And so we're hoping that this is a series that's we're switching around the service or elements a little bit, even the things we're talking about, the focuses of it. We want you to kind of shake out of that a little bit, and we want you to see all the places around you every moment, every hour that you can actually honor and worship God. So that's the start of our series. That's a lot of behind the scenes of what we're doing and why we're doing it as well. If you'd like to follow up and ask any additional questions, or after next week's sermon, if you want to get in before we record on Tuesday mornings for the podcast, you can do so at podcast@trinitynewlife.com and always on Instagram @trinitynewlife. That's it. Yeah. No.
Oh, at Trinity Life on Instagram. It's just like when I made everyone not say amen in a prayer the other day. They're all like, wait, you God. Like, we're going to get back to the amen. It's just like, anyways, have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Strong place.
Bye.